Welcome to another episode of the Vets and Real Estate Podcast. I'm your host, Will Curtis, and I'm joined by another military veteran who has moved into the world of real estate, this time with Drake Johnson. Drake, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, so tell us, what is it that you did while you were in the service?
Yeah, so while I was in the service, I actually did 8 years with the United States Marine Corps. Hurrah. I did 4 years active, 4 years reserve, and I was a 0311 infantryman, rifleman.
Okay. How did you go from infantryman in the Marine Corps into real estate? That doesn't feel like you're kicking indoors, but a little bit differently, right?
Yeah. So no, there was definitely some gaps in there. I actually went from the Marine Corps to college. So I actually got out of the Marine Corps and I had every intention to get into the world of physical therapy. So I was really interested in medicine, and really that was all about giving back to our community and to injured vets. I was very motivated to do that. That took me all the way through an undergrad and a graduate degree, pretty much all the way up until COVID. And then I took another detour because I was actually applying for another advanced degree. It's a very lengthy time, and I needed some more medical training. So I actually got my EMT, and then after that, it was only a natural path to look for a career because I was tired of being a broke college student. And, and I ended up joining the fire department. Now that was all just as a way to further my profession, get better at what I did, gain more experience, get some hands-on training, and be around patients and get the experience that I didn't necessarily have from the military, and that led me to join the military. And from there, I actually used the VA loan to buy my first house, and I bought my first house, and within a year, it exploded. The market exploded. So I was one of the very, very probably few recipients of the Zillow home offer, where my home actually, I purchased it a year prior using a VA loan, zero down, lived in it for a year, and then Zillow came in and offered me 78% more than I paid for it the year prior. Kind of a Cinderella story, yeah. It was really hard to say no to that. I took that, and then I actually started reading everything I could about real estate investing. This was a single family home, and I got lucky. I found another firefighter that was actually a real estate investor, and that led me into introducing me to my first home flip. And then I partnered with him, and we did our first home flip. And again, another Cinderella story. We landed in, this was the early part of 2021 when the market was absolutely exploding. And just north of Austin, we sold our first home flip for what we thought was going to be a $30,000 profit, and we ended up making $110,000.
All right.
So
fair enough. Yeah.
first two, they were extremely lucky. I'll say it, but the confidence that gave me and the sheer luck that I ran into, coupled with the fact that I took advantage of some of the things, not only my VA education my VA benefits for my education, but also my VA benefits for my first home loan. Both of those set me up for success, and I'm internally grateful for them. So that's how it came about.
So you're flipping houses, still at the fire department, but then you started doing more of the brokerage, as I understand, right?
Yeah, correct. No, I was in real estate for almost 2.5 years before I actually decided to get licensed. And the licensure was really for two primary reasons. One, I wanted to show our clients that I was a professional. Standards mean everything to me. And I think that's my military background. Especially in real estate, we both know, Will, how easy it is to get your real estate license and become a professional. I wanted to, emulate what it was to be a professional, what it was to be licensed, to be trusted, to be understood that I was trying to be ethical and do the right thing as always, and that was the most justified next step.
Sure. So what did that first couple of years look like when you were transitioning from more the flipper side of things, but now into the real estate professional, working with clients? Like, what did that start to look like?
At first, it was difficult, mostly because of how I started, because I always had, my best interest in mind, and really the only experience I had working with clients was on the sell side. So once we finished the house, I would list the house, and that was my first experience working with other real estate agents and their clients. And it became really evident that I was always a service first kind of approach where I wanted the other side to really have a great experience with us. Even the agents, I treated the other side agents like they were our client. We did a lot for them. We really prioritized our relationships. We really prioritized our name, our brand. Everything was about making sure that the person on the other side really appreciated the work that we put into the house. So that was my first experience, and I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it so much that at first I was saying no to taking on individual clients, and then I started to say yes. And my very first listing actually was probably one of the hardest deals that I had done to date. And I took it, and I remember just lasting through it. It reminded me of everything that I had done in my life was just no quit. It was resiliency. It was all the variables that made me successful in the military and was starting to help progress in my career. And I said, I can continue doing this.
So, being more service first, what does that look like? And that's one of the things we've explored with many of the veterans that have come on here is that change of mindset into now I have to look for me, finding that now what does service look like? So what do you think is service first for you? What has made that kind of stand out for you?
Yeah, well, I think it's everything, right? I think it's hardwired in our DNA. It's who we are as individuals. When I joined the Marine Corps, I knew it wasn't for me. Selfishly, it was because it ended up bettering my life in almost every single way, even though I didn't realize it at the time. Being an 18-year-old kid joining the Marine Corps, like I had much different expectations versus the reality of what I found. And however, the one thing that stood with me was the feeling of not just bettering myself, but working with a team and watching us complete things that I otherwise would never think that I could. So transitioning into real estate, I took that approach and I just said, these are all the things that made me successful as a young man. I don't think that they would not make me successful now as an adult with a business. And, when I introduce myself to people, they normally, within, I don't know, the first minute they say, prior military? And I say, yes, sir, yes, ma'am. I walk into it, I shake their hand, I look in their eyes. I do all the things that we are taught, right? And also that anybody would respect. And I believe that portrays a level of not just confidence, but it also portrays a level of trust. And it's showing that I'm here for you. I'm going to do the right thing. I'm capable of dealing with difficult conversations and difficult tasks and overcoming. And that's what you're going to get.
That's fair. Have you found that because of that upbringing, the military mindset, have you found that that's attracted certain type of clients to you, or is it still kind of just whatever comes around comes around?
No, absolutely. I mean, it's actually to the point now where I feel like we can market to it because I know how particular it is. The older generation really appreciates our military, in my opinion. A lot of that is our aging demographic. A lot of our boomers, because they understood that's the way that they were raised. It was much more standard customs and courtesies. So when I show up and I say, yes, ma'am, yes, sir, look them in the face and their eyes and tell them I'm going to do something, they believe me. They're going to give me a shot. There's a lot more humility that's also included into it. It's not, telling them what brokerage I work for, or how many deals I've closed, or everything that I've done, et cetera, et cetera. They want you to be organic. And I feel like that kind of portrays a lot through for us that have served, because especially if we have ever had to do anything tough in our time in the military, we understand that, we get humbled very quickly, you know, very quickly. I remember, standing on those yellow footprints, like 18 years old. I was like, I'm not afraid of these drill instructors, and whatever's going to come, and every step of the way was something that I had to overcome. And I feel that demographic really relates to it. They also usually see a younger man standing in front of them that wants to accomplish things, that takes life very seriously, and they can trust me that I'm going to be just as diligent with them as I did with my previous career.
I can see that. And I think that's a lot of those of us that are prior military have that same attention to detail, discipline, dedication. I think, there's all three different words, but I think they really kind of come together in a lot of ways as we take that into our, whatever it is, real estate, medicine, whatever the case that was, but we take it into that next career. And it makes us, I don't know, sometimes weird compared to the civilians that we're working with. And I mean, have you noticed that as well? Is that you're just different from
Absolutely.
the civilian counterpart? How so? I mean, how does that? How do you cope with that that difference?
Well, so I'll be honest with you. When I first left the Marine Corps, I struggled, and I know most of my good friends and fellow vets probably can share this sentiment. It's not easy. I said, I went from sharing a barracks room with some of my best friends that I was ready to, frankly, go and take a bullet for, to getting into the civilian sector where it's a very selfish world. If I'm going to be frank, a lot of people are really just concerned about themselves. And it's no fault to them. It's just they didn't experience what we experienced. They never had to train to go into combat. They never had to take the responsibility of other men or women, for that matter, and know that their well-being is their responsibility. And I had leadership very early on in the Marine Corps, so it was like, and I was responsible for 4 other grown men, and then 12 other grown men. And we trained for conflict. We trained to go into direct combat. It's a very humbling experience. So coming out into the civilian sector, when I first got out, I was lost for the lack of better. I had plans. I've never been that person to not have plans, but I was lost because I didn't have the support system that I had in the Marine Corps.
Obviously, you're in a different place now. How did you find that support system? How does that look now compared to, being that squad leader, being that section sergeant or whatever you guys called the Marine Corps,
Mm-hmm.
and then having that built in now, having to redefine and find that all over again?
Yeah, no, it was difficult. Long story short, I had to find a new purpose. And I also had to find a new team. So I got very lucky in the sense that I had activities that kept me busy, that kept me mentally and physically busy. I rolled right into a full-time position as an undergraduate student in a college, and then I kept myself busy. I got a part-time job right away. I joined a gym right away. I'm very big into health and fitness. That was actually both of my undergraduate degrees was in exercise physiology. So still training, I think, was the number one thing that kept my mind and my body straight. I speak to a lot of vets, and I know it's so hard because we go forward to 20 years where we every morning wake up at 0600 and we're on the line ready to do PT, and sometimes it feels forced. It doesn't feel fun. I know in the Marine Corps we used to do some PT that always just forced fun, right? And
Yeah.
I always said, when I get out, I'm going to do my own thing. And I was lucky that I enjoyed PT, but I think in the grand scheme of things, that was one of the staples that kept me sane. Two other things that are kind of maybe unrelated, but if you're in an opportunity to care for another being, in the case I was 22 years old, I actually got a dog at 6 weeks, and I trained him for almost 3 months when I got out, and that dog ended up probably saving my life more than once. And then I actually started training Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So there was some other things that helped me on my path, but I was super focused to accomplishing goals. I just had to change what my goal was.
That's interesting because you're talking about multiple different groups to kind of fill the one thing the military did for you, which is strange to think the military did that because most of us it was a job, especially when you get the thank you for your service. It was a job. I appreciate it. You're polite,
Hmm.
but then you realize that your identity, your personality, your habits, your mental health, all of that is wrapped up into one single career, which I don't know. To me, it still seems crazy. And I have a son now who I got out at 26. My son is now 26. And looking at the comparisons, that I'm like, at your age, this is everything I had done. And not that he's not doing great things, but he hasn't had anywhere near the life that I had by that point in time, right? It's such a, I don't know, just to me, just still shocking that there's that big of a difference in that civilian versus military um, path to leadership.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think again, it's a blessing and a curse. Joining at 18, you get put in a position where by 19, or even sometimes still 18, you could be in a foreign country. You could be responsible for other lives besides yourself, or you could be responsible for just the decisions that you make affect other people's lives. Not even those next to you, but also in a different country. And I think that responsibility thrust upon us puts us in a really delicate position, but it also translates when we get out of that active duty service. We've already learned those lessons. We've already had those experiences, and those experiences are very difficult to replicate. I think the closest experience to the military may be like, extremely competitive sports, or maybe just any younger individual that's thrust into independence early on, right? Like, as a kind of a joke, I knew early on I was going to join the military or something because at 18 I got the 18. When you're 18, you're going to be in school or a job or you're out of here. So I knew early on. I didn't have a place to lay and kind of wait until something fell in my lap. I had to make it happen, and I think that's probably one of the best things that could have happened to me.
You mentioned you went to school right out of the military. A lot of veterans do that, even go into real estate after the fact. But what was it like going in at 22 or so
Mhm.
as now a freshman? What was that like having, military and deployment experience and all that kind of fun stuff now being a college freshman?
Yeah, the easiest. I'm sure you can imagine what it's like, right? Another dose of humility. At 22 years old, I already, you know, spent time in different countries and been all over the world, and you walk into your history class and you're sitting next to an 18-year-old that can't name the last U.S. president. It's difficult. It's difficult. However, I will say it taught me something different because when I was in the military, or when we are exposed to limiting things, limiting beliefs, certain ideologies. We only see one path. And especially in the combat arms, you're trained to do one thing really. You don't learn world affairs, you don't learn geopolitics, you don't understand English, so academia gave me something that I didn't have before. And as I went through academia, it taught me patience. It taught me how to write better, how to read better, and a lot of the skills that I had built in the Marine Corps directly translated. Being on time, being punctual, all those things. Especially as a college student, there'd be some times where I'd be the first person in class. Small classes, but the first person in class, and the rest of my cohort are 10, 15 minutes away, walking in there, bedhead, and I'm dressed and ready to go at 09, 10 in the morning, So there's a lot of things that helped me stand out. And I think that I had more respect for my professors even because they looked at me like an adult, not like a child. And, I think it's really easy for college professors, I'm sure you can relate, Will, that these young children will, walk in the classroom and, maybe you have another vet, it's night and day. And the difference in their age could be only 3 or 4 years.
I had that experience. I had my first veteran as I teach, at the university level. I had my first veteran come in this last semester, and it was weird because at first he looked pretty young. Didn't think that was going to be the case. Maybe a little bit older than everybody else, but not what I was expecting. I said something. He hung out after class. He goes, "You were in the military." I was like, "I was." And he goes, "I would blah 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 blah." And I was like, "No kidding." Instant right there. Rest of the semester we got along great, but it was definitely one of those very quickly you could see, and that was first or second class that this came to our understanding. But from there you could see there was a different level of maturity. There's definitely idea where it's where I teach the private university, very well off, affluent, people that are typically at that, where they have different opportunities, but yet still that military background, what he had gone through, put him night and day against, people that were, I mean, extremely well funded, extremely well taken care of, where some of these students are getting internships in New York and their parents are able to pay for their, living expenses to go and do a free internship at some place because it'd be good for their career field. Well, that's half the reason I was in the Army, because mom and dad couldn't afford to do anything for me. So absolutely, I definitely can say that that's a difference on that side of it. Did you find that you got along with the other students, or were you kind of just separate and you were just too different to assimilate?
Yeah, I mean, I'll admit that I wish that I would have assimilated more. Um, Again, maybe one of my confessions of lack of humility is I thought I was better than them, if I'll be frank. I'll admit that as a flaw, now that I'm older, but at that age, there was still a lot of young confidence, let's just call it.
Sure. Yeah.
And believe it or not, I made one of my best friends, still to this day, was actually another fellow veteran. So it was like when we find each other, we come together like, even if we didn't even serve together, it's like we automatically assimilate with each other. I think that's probably one of the superpowers. And he was an Army guy, so, but he was in the infantry, I was in the infantry, and it was like boom, click. We were good. And I had a friend all through undergrad, all through grad school, even after. And there was a select few that we did get along with, but it was mostly the other students that were more mature, that maybe didn't have the luxuries in life, right? Just the same as us, and that was the beauty of the military, is that so much of us came together from so many different walks of life, but we usually all had one thing in common, is we had some kind of adversity or something that led us to want to serve. And usually it was because we didn't have the best backgrounds. And misery loves company, and we had plenty of company. So,
Yeah.
we did great that way. And I feel like that college brought that out again, and it's the one thing I think that relates, for veterans or anybody that goes through challenging or hardship, is that it does bring a bond together. Like, I know if we did make any friends, it were during the hardest classes. The most challenging professors brought the students together, believe it or not. And sometimes it was against the professor, but nonetheless it brought us together. I can think of quite a few classes that did that.
A couple.
Yeah, absolutely. But long story short, I didn't assimilate as much as I'd want to, and I think it was because I kept some of that arrogance that I wish I wouldn't have. And if I had a piece of advice for myself going back, it would be to let down some of those walls. To be more friendly and welcoming, and try to assimilate myself with my environment, because that's something I think that I should have learned and should have known better. Was the thing that makes the most combat effective units is the fact that they learn their environments and they assimilate with their environments, not pretend that they're above their environments. And that was definitely a good lesson for me.
No, I can certainly see it, and I would say even from my background, I would say it's similar. That you automatically, I don't know, it's the way we walk, the way we talk. You know, another veteran as soon as you meet them or within a few minutes, you can kind of figure it out. And we do naturally kind of find one another. Most of my friends through undergrad, all prior military.
Hmm.
So it was definitely the case. Now, graduate school was a little bit different. There was nobody else that was prior military, but I went to St. Mary's, working my MBA, and a lot of the law professors were coming over and taking classes so they can get their MBA because it's free for them. So that's who all my peer group was again, people that are older, further on in life, kind of that same thing. So the maturity is just a little bit different, which as you're saying it, I'm thinking, I'm like, I don't know. Some of the dumb stuff we did was not very mature, and you're laughing. So you guys probably did some of the same dumb things that we did as well. Um, but it's still kind of funny that as goofy, as immature as we are inside that closed door, when the mission comes on, it's a completely different setup.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you're talking about dumb things like strapping people between mattresses and throwing them off the third deck, then yeah, I can understand. Um,
Yeah,
um,
absolutely.
but that's the beauty of, well, that was the beauty of our profession, is that we could turn it on, and that only comes with all the other things, right? All the respect, the tradition, the heritage, and I think more importantly, the one thing that allowed us to turn it on more than anything else is that we felt responsible for the person next to us. And when you get out and you're only responsible for yourself, you lose that. You lose that sense of purpose. You lose that type of mentality where you're doing something, you're serving, not just for yourself. It's not about you. Everything is for the good of the team, the group, the platoon, your guys, and they're always watching you. So your ability to lead from the front, set the example, and believe it or not, like with this business, I feel like we have that second opportunity, because we're doing that for our clients, um, or we're even doing that for ourselves. And then we might not be able to have the exposure that we wanted to, but I've even learned recently that comes from still being seen, and that might be coming from social media. That might be coming from your network and your ability to talk to other professionals and get a chance to work with somebody, and you just know that if you're given a shot to work on something, that other person is not going to regret giving you an opportunity, and that allows you to kind of replace your purpose with something else.
And that's what you're saying right there. I think is the one thing that as we've done, I don't know, 60 odd, 70 odd episodes, that's the recurring theme that keeps coming up with. And I think the part of why I keep getting more fascinated with this is that I know when we went through this, I thought it was just me. I thought I was weird. I was strange. I had no purpose. Like it was just what a terrible person I am. And then I started finding a different path, started finding where I was serving again. And I don't know, maybe it's more therapy to me. Maybe that's why I keep doing the podcast, is because I realize I'm not weird. I'm not unique. Every one of us has gone through the same thing. The story may be slightly different, but the journey of, wow, I had a purpose. Now I don't have a purpose. Now I'm finding purpose again. Um, it's there, and some folks don't find that purpose. And I think that's the scary thing, is that many of us have made it through. We found the purpose again, but knowing that too many of us, I think I've buried more folks after service than while I was in now because of that lack of purpose. Just knowing that that's the way that our career field and our early profession goes, but yet there's so many successful things that we can find ourselves afterwards once we find that purpose.
Yeah, yeah. It's a tough topic. Yeah, I lost my best friend in the Marine Corps, and it's it's the hardest thing to deal with in the world because you don't know why, and and you don't have signs usually, but this is why we do this. This is why we have these conversations. This is why we talk about the opportunities for veterans, because I think we're uniquely positioned to be some of the best people in society. Like truly, it is an ultra bias, but God, the things that I've accomplished with young Marines is incredible. Like you wouldn't even believe that we could get done the things that we got done in the time that we did it. And given an opportunity and a chance, I just believe that veterans specifically can do whatever they want. And we have the resources and we have a network of other people, and a lot of times our stigma of suffer in silence or don't reach out or bury your feelings, like that all causes a lot more pain than it needs to. And I always joke and I say, just point and shoot because I'll go. And that mentality, I think, is carried on amongst us, and they just need a new mission. They need a new purpose, and they need to be around other people that understand that. And don't get me wrong, like that's not just veterans specifically. There's a lot of civilians that are wonderful at this, and prior athletes are in a great example. Like they understand that teamwork, they understand that mission, that goal. They understand everything is about more than just themselves. It's all about finding people that are willing to meet the standard. And I say one of the hardest things is not just getting out and being alone, but it's getting out and being alone and not finding other people that respect the standard. And the standard that you want to live up to and the standard that you hold yourself to, you can't expect other people to live by that standard, but you can still set the example. And I feel like that you find a lot of other people by living your example, even if it's not quick, because we know it's not quick. But when you find those other people, you'll create another team that's just as strong as the one that you had in the Marine Corps, or in the military in general. But it's going to take some work.
Yeah. No, I agree. And I do think of that community as one of the things that, we strive or really drive to have. And we started talking about that early on, but I think that's one of the things that, especially with other veterans, especially going into a career, I remember early on, it was a former Marine. He was I guess there's no such thing as a former Marine. He was an out of service Marine, right? He was a semester ahead of me in school. Both got a real estate finance degree. He was a semester ahead. We competed on every single thing. Who was going to get their CCIM first? Who was going to become a broker first? Who was going to close the first $1 million deal? Like, we competed on everything. And it was always one of those. I remember we'd have lunch maybe once a quarter or so. It was kind of more impromptu, but generally every 3-4 months we'd get lunch. And what are you working on? What's going on? Where are you at here? And like, we just drove each other until we finally turn around and one of us would beat the other one, but it was never like, you suck, I mean, a little bit of ribbon, a little bit of all that, but finding that community where we're both just fighting to win, even though we're competing against each other, we really was sharpening iron, through that process. And finding that community, I think once you find it, that's the challenge. That's the hard thing to do. But once you get it, I mean, I probably don't say it enough, but I mean, Keith was a good reason why early in my career, I tried so hard because I couldn't let this Marine Corps officer beat me. I had to outperform him. I'm an Army guy. I mean, come on. But it was that kind of just machismo, that hua, whatever you want to call it, that we had to do to just compete. But we're always trying to make sure the other one was like, hey, how'd you do that? Oh, I did this and this and this. Awesome. I'm gonna try that too. So I don't know. It's such an interesting community that you can absolutely rebuild, and you naturally will find it.
And it's a great point. I think too, when you take that in consideration, it's because we know in the military that we're not going to accomplish anything by ourselves. So it's just, we don't even ever try, right? Like, can you think of one thing in the military besides standing out on a PT test or something where you feel like that you're doing something that does not need other people to be successful? Because I can't.
No, even in PT, I was a terrible runner. Like, I could never do it. But I had a squad leader who,
Yeah.
if he didn't have to score, wasn't going to the board, he ran and paced me. I mean, here, this guy was, outranked me, was making sure I was good. All right, he was a natural runner where I struggled to get my 16-minute 2 mile. He was like an 11-minute 2 mile guy. And he's like, look, here's about a 15-minute pace. You stay with me. We're going to get it. And as soon as I start falling back, get your up here and start going
Hmm.
with me, just to make sure that I paced. And, he'd get in trouble. Why would you run so slow? Hey, I was pacing Curtis. But yet, he was getting in trouble but taking care of his soldier all at the same time. So yeah, I can't think of hardly anything we did by ourselves. Or if it was by ourselves, it was because we had the support of everybody else that was out there through all that. So you're absolutely right. So as we kind of start working to wrap up, I know you shared that you would have simulated, quicker if you do anything different. What about in your real estate side of career? Is there anything that you would have done different or looked at differently as you kind of made that transition into real estate?
Yeah, I would have taken the advice that when you start anything new, you go and you seek the best people at what you're doing, and you do whatever you can to surround yourself with them. It doesn't matter. And two, that means if you're moving cities, if you're moving towns, like for example, anybody says like I want to be in finance, where do you go? You go to New York, right? And it's if you want to get into politics, where do you go? You go to DC. And it doesn't matter where you start. Like it just doesn't matter. Like you could be sweeping floors, but if you're sweeping floors in the best office in New York City with the goal of learning and growing and becoming a sponge to that new environment, there's no way that you won't be successful. And you're already setting yourself up for success because you're not looking at it as a simplistic approach of this is just about me. You're again assimilating with a new team, with a new environment, with a new culture. And the best thing you could do, like for me, I chose the Marine Corps because I said, what is the hardest thing that's going to make me the best? You know? And that time, it was the Marine Corps poster. That's how they get us, right? And then we show up and we're
Fighting
like,
dragons. Yeah, yeah.
oh man, you guys lied. No, I'm just kidding. But in the reality, it was you want to be with the best. So surround yourself with the best and work your way up. Put your head down. Be humble. Ask a lot of questions. And what's the old Asian saying, right? 2 ears, one mouth. Listen more than you talk. That would be my advice. I mean, I still look to do that to this very day. There's so much that I reach out to you in my CCIM courses, and I say like, hey, listen, I've done a bit, but I'm nowhere near where I want to be. And if you want to truly be a student of life and you want to truly be a part of a great team, then be a great team member. And I think it starts with being a great team member before you ever worry about being a part of a top team.
Yeah. Good stuff. Well, Drake, thank you so much for sharing your time with us and sharing your story. If any of our listeners wanted to connect with you, what's the best way for them to find you?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me again. All the socials, Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, just they're Drake Johnson. Email Drake at Vertus Realty, Texas. And yeah, always here. I'm really eager to help other veterans too if they want to follow that path or if they ever need a resource or want to talk. I'm always like to make myself available for those folks.
Awesome. Well, Drake, thank you again so much for your time.
Yeah, thank you, Will.